Good morning. You're coming to us from Glendale, Arizona. The Freedom's Phoenix Farm is located in the heart of Glendale, Arizona in the Sonoran Desert. And what we'd like to share with you is some of our gardening tips that we've learned over the past couple of years. I've gardened when I was younger and I didn't really take a stewardship role in that, but now it's completely up to me as far as learning how to make this thing work. And so what I've done over the past couple of years is we've planted different ways. We've planted in the ground, we've planted in boxes, we've done hanging plants, hanging gardens, and we're going to try to share with you what works and what does. What we've done here on our property is we picked out a plot that would work. Actually, I did, and I thought this place on the west end of our house would work really good. And we've already done some preparation of the soil back in March, and we did some information and videos on how to pick your plot and nurture the soil and water it and do some planting and stuff. And so now what we're going to do is show you, it's the end of June here, and it's a little after 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's a little over 90 degrees, so it's going to be a very warm day. And some of the challenges that we face here in the Sonoran Desert is trying to keep cool, and that's no different when you're planting. Plants they get a lot of stress, under a lot of stress whenever they're in the sun all the time. So you have to learn how to deal with it. Now we can get 3 to 4 planting seasons a year from our garden, and I'm going to show you maybe some ways that you can make that happen if you really want to have this going year-round. So let's just take an overview of the garden. This is about 3 months worth of work now. We're kind of at the end of our season here, and this is when a lot of the things have become ready. And we've got onions and carrots, kale and collards, squash and cucumbers and zucchini, and way down at the end over there we've planted watermelon. And one thing about watermelon is it doesn't take much. That's just one plant. It kind of overtakes your garden, so you need to give that a lot of room. Lettuces over here, they don't do so well in the heat. These have managed to stay for a while and they're still producing, so we still use those. And then everybody's favorite is tomatoes. I have a lot of tomato plants. We're not getting as many this year for as many plants as I have. I should be getting more, and as a matter of fact, I should be getting more of a yield from the garden than I should have with all the things that I have planted. And one thing that I think is a factor in that are the bees. They're not, you know, we've done so much to get rid of the bees and keep them out of our lives and out of our properties, especially in these urban areas. And they don't pollinate because they don't come around. And so sometimes what you have to do is self-pollinate them. You can take a little Q-tip on the flowers and just brush it around so that maybe you'll have a better chance of some of these things pollinating, because I have lots of flowers but not as much fruit and vegetables as I would like to have. So that is one consideration. What I've done here out here in the garden is to help with the heat and to keep the plants alive as much as I can, as I've created this shade system. I've just put PVC in the ground with the rebar. There's rebar pipes in there, and then just a frame system, and I've draped this shade cloth over it. Now this shade cloth will let a lot of the sun's rays through, that you're still going to be able to get the green on the plants and they'll get their sunlight, but it keeps it about 15 degrees cooler, and that's just crucial for these plants being able to survive. Another thing that I've done, because I was out here 2 or 3 times a day having to water all of this, is I've created a watering system. Okay, now this is an automatic timer system. I don't have it on all the time, only if I'm going to be gone, but what I've done is I've put in this line here. This is 700 irrigation tubing. If you go to a hardware store or one of the big box stores, you'll be able to find this. And this is it's a bigger round tubing, and it's the main line that goes through the garden here, and it comes right off the hose. And then I have bleeder hoses coming out here. It's 1/4 inch porous bleeder hose, and what I do is just turn it on, and the water circulates through the main tube and it bleeds off into some of the plants in the garden. And what it does is it deep waters your plants, so you don't have to water as often so much, because what deep watering does is you're you're keeping a constant low flow of water on there so it can absorb more deeply into the roots. It's just where you want it, not just kind of running off on the side. And so I've learned that over the years too, is that if you can keep this deep watered, and you can make an easy way to do it. Now it was an investment. It was a couple $100 to get all of the tubing and the little connectors and the timer and all of that stuff, but I only have to do it once. And now that I've laid this, the next time I garden, I can kind of plant along these rows that I have the tubing, and it'll just water it without me having to come out here all the time. All I have to do is turn on the hose for an hour or two, and it'll just bleed out the water and deep water it. So those are some other things that we've learned as far as trying to keep the garden more efficient. Now we've gone through preparing the soil, planting your plants from seeds or from plants that you can get at the nursery, and put them into the ground and water them and all of that. And now what we do is, when you water the garden, the weeds like to grow too. So you constantly have to keep up on weeding. I mean, it's like an every couple of day thing. You got to go in there and pull out the grass, pull out the plants that are the weeds that are growing up, because if you don't, they're going to compete for the water and the nutrients that you're putting in the soil for your plants, and so you're not going to have a productive yield for that. So you do have to keep up on the weeding. Now, another thing that people get are bugs in various areas. There's aphids, there's other plants, there's birds that like to munch on your things, and so you do all this work to feed your family some nutritious food, and then you've got the bugs. You're competing with the bugs for whatever you're planting. So one of the things that helps is for aphids, you can, a lot of people, they spray soapy water on the leaves, and that seems to help. We did have an issue with groundhogs here, and every now and then I see the holes around the yard, and there's been a few that have been in the garden, and I believe that cayenne pepper helps. You want to keep it as natural as possible, because I mean, you're not going to be wanting to dump a lot of chemicals in your garden, because that's what you're trying to prevent. You want the healthy food, you want it going into the soil and feeding your plants good nutritious soil so that they can produce good food for you. So some of those things that you can use also for bugs are diatomaceous earth. Now we use this here. It's a white powder. It's very fine. Its technical term is fossilized phytoplankton, and what it does is it dehydrates the bugs. It's very fine powder. It's safe to eat. It's safe for your pets, your animals. You can put it around for whatever kind of bugs you have, and it just dehydrates them over a couple of days, and then you don't really have to worry so much about any chemicals, because it's just not going to harm you in any way. Some other things that might help, because if you're watering a lot in your garden, you're going to be leaching out a lot of the nutrients that are in there. So what you can do is add, this is fish emulsion. You can add this about once a month. It's a pretty weak solution. You put a couple teaspoons in a gallon of water, and you just pour it directly on your plants. And what it does is it helps with the protein, the chlorophyll development, to help with the green leaves and everything develop. And it puts nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium back in the soil, because, like I said, you're leaching it out, and you need to have those nutrients in there so that you will get a better yield on your plants. And then about every couple of weeks, I also do this. You can put some of this, I'm not endorsing anything, but this just happens to be what I use, some Miracle-Gro plant food in this sprayer. You hook it up to your hose, and then you can just spray it like you're watering it one day, and you just spray it on there. That will also help to feed your plants some vital nutrients that might be leached out in the water. Now, there's some other things here. This is called Wonder Soil. It's a product a friend of ours has developed. She's from Las Vegas, and she has a little manufacturing plant there. And these things are really cool. They're made out of, it's a compressed material. It has dirt, and it has absorbent material in here. And what you do is you break it up. If you just want to use it for soil, you break it up and you pour a little bit of water on it, and what it will do is absorb in there, and we'll just let that go for a minute, but it'll just actually be soil. And what it does is, when you put it in, when you're planting your plants, you can just put a little bit of each of, a couple handfuls of the dirt in with your seeds or with your plants when you're planting them in the spring, and you don't need to use as much water when you use these, because they have the absorbent material, and they also have nutrients in there, and they've been proven to they just do a really good job. Now see, it does take a bit of water to get it going, And we'll just let that sit in there a little more. But it'll just be nice aerated dirt. That's one thing, is you want the aeration. You don't want a compacted soil when you're planting your seeds or your plants, because then the water and all the nutrients don't get in there as well. You want a nice loose soil for all of that. And these things here, these are also the Wonder Soil, and they come in little compartments, like for little seeds. So in the spring, when you're planting your seeds, you can plant them right in there, and your seeds have established themselves, you just break off each individual. They kind of look like egg cartons, just individual packets. You just plant it right in the ground, and it will nutrify your plant that way. So here you go. Here's the dirt. And then you just put this in the hole with your soil, or spread it with your seeds, and it will help keep your soil nutrified the whole time. Now, as I mentioned before, we can get here in Arizona, you can get about 3, if you're really ambitious, you can get 4 growing seasons a year. Now, it takes a lot of work, and we've already established a lot of work there, so we could really get 4 growing seasons out of this garden, but probably we'll just do 3 when all of these things are done in just a few weeks. Now, like I said, in here for our summer garden, we actually planted these somewhere around the beginning of March, and so it's the end of June now. Everything's coming to be at the end of the gardening cycle. I'm not going to be planting anything until the end of August, maybe the beginning of September. We'll see how it goes. And so, you know, you got September through December for your winter garden or your fall garden, and then you got your winter garden right from December through March, and then March through June is your summer gardening. And so you do want to let your soil rest a little bit, but you do need to, when I go back again, I'll till a lot of these things under and nutrify the soil again with some mulch. You know, you can get some steer manure. Lowe's has really good steer manure there. They don't have a lot of, you know, it's 97 cents a bag, and there's not a lot of rocks or anything like some of the other ones have a lot of junk in them that it just kind of clumps up your soil. But so that's another thing to consider. Now, some of the other things that we have around our property here, we have just under 2 acres. And the people here before us spent a lot of time just putting in their own things. We've got we have a fig tree here, we have an apricot tree across the yard, and a pomegranate tree, and we also have grapes. And also, we're very lucky to have mature citrus trees. Back here, where we keep our goats, we have grapefruits, we have several types of orange trees, and lemon trees. So we'll go back here and we'll take a look at the goats and the chickens. We'll get into the animals and just see how they're doing, and how to feed them and keep them going, and what they need to sustain themselves. They pretty much tell me every morning when they're hungry. They do their calling, and you gotta feed them. Now, this is alfalfa. I give them about a flake of alfalfa a day for these guys. The rest of the time they can forage around in the grass. They're really good about they're not so much like the grass. They like the foliage, the leafy greens, and if you can see on this tree here, they've pretty much taken all of the leaves off the bottom of them, which is fine. I needed to trim that anyway, but that tree needs to grow up. But they're really good about getting a lot of the brush around the fencing and stuff, and so I can move them around to different parts of the yard, and they take care of a lot of that stuff for me. I really like to go as organic as I can, and they do the job. Put this flake of alfalfa down for them, and they just munch on it. It's one of their favorite things. It's sweet to them, and it has the nutrients that they need every day. They need a little bit of that every day for their digestion. So the goats have, you know, 4 stomachs, and so if you really not feeding them well, they can get sick pretty easy, and I'd just rather not have huge vet bills. So just keeping them fed right. You don't need to feed them a lot of different stuff. Like with the chickens, that's a whole different story, and we'll go into that in a minute. But for the goats, just alfalfa, and they forage around the grass, and they do pretty well on that. And another thing is you want to make sure that they've got water every day.